Can a 7-times world champion lose faith in your own car before the middle of the season? How serious should the situation be for Lewis Hamilton to suggest abandoning the development of SF25? Today we reveal the truth behind Ferrari's technical collapse and the doubts they are consuming to Maranello's team just before the Austrian Grand Prix. Hamilton's arrival to Ferrari felt as a declaration of war on mediocrity, a commitment to the absolute. Internally, the Italian team took advantage of the impulse. It was said that the SF25 was a built car thinking about Hamilton. There was talk of an aggressive concept, innovative solutions, accumulated learning after years of frustration. Radical changes were promised in design philosophy, a new way of understanding aerodynamics, and above all, a more integrated work structure between pilots, engineers, and technical directors. In addition, the conditions of high aerodynamic load exposed their crudest shortcomings, becoming impossible to maintain a stable aerodynamic platform, which not only affects pure performance but also tire management, which degrades at an alarming pace. The most worrying thing for a pilot like Hamilton is that these deficiencies are not trivial or solutionable with minor adjustments. These are structural conception problems, decisions taken at the earliest phase of the design that now require complex and expensive redesign. Hamilton, with all his experience and technical sensitivity, has perceived it from the first test. The car does not respond. It does not convey trust. Each attempt to adapt its driving style to SF25 has been an exercise of frustration. The result is a chaotic season, in which Ferrari is not only far from fighting for victories, but also begins to suffer internally. The engineers are forced to work with temporary solutions, the directors begin to justify the unjustifiable, and the pilots, especially Hamilton, begin to show signs of loss of faith. The atmosphere in Maranello changes. Collective enthusiasm is passed to silent doubt. The questions float without response. Is this really competitive car? Is there room to evolve? Or is it another year more wasted in promises that do not translate into results? Everything that seemed like a dream begins to blur quickly. And Hamilton, the man who had to lead the revolution, is tied to a car that is not up to his ambition. That is the true crisis. Not only technique but emotional. A premature disenchantment that threatens to turn the most anticipated history of the year into one of the most resonant disappointments of recent times in Formula One. From Maranello, the official reaction has been miscerned, but clearly defensive. Fred Vasseur, the director of the Ferrari team, has come out publicly to confirm what many already expected. There is an update package on the way to the SF25. The speech is careful, almost surgical. Vasseur says that these improvements are designed to address the most serious weak points of the car, especially the problem pull rod rear suspension. There is talk of a structural redesign that allows the car to operate in a more stable aerodynamic window, in which the background does not suffer premature wear and the tires do not collapse in the middle of stint. In addition, a new soil has been mentioned, recalibrated to interact more effectively with the aerodynamic load platform that the team has been modifying since March. But the devil is in the details. Vasseur does not promise miracles. In fact, their own words point to a limited impact, with improvements that will be measured in hundreds, not in tenths. That is, the hopes of a radical transformation of the SF25 are, in the best, minimum. Worse, the most relevant updates will not reach the Grand Prix of Great Britain. And although it is speculated that some could debut in advance in Austria, there are no guarantees. This means that the car that will be presented in the Red Bull Ring will still be essentially the same as it has disappointed in the first calendar quotes. Lewis Hamilton has not remained silent. In fact, his reaction has been as subtle as devastating. When asked directly about the alleged improvements in Canada, he replied with an irony that left everyone silent. What updates? His tone, his body expression, the way he avoided going into details, everything indicated the same thing: skepticism. Hamilton does not believe. And not because faith is missing in the human team that surrounds him, but because he knows exactly what is wrong in the SF25. It is a car that does not react to set-up changes. It is a car that does not generate trust under braking. And above all, it is a machine that demands too much from the pilot without delivering the corresponding performance. Beyond the gesture, your concern is deeper. Hamilton has suggested that the magnitude of the problem could justify a more radical change of strategy. Abandon the development of the SF25 and focus all efforts on the 2026 car. An extreme proposal, but not without logic. In a technical regulation that is about to transform, continuing to invest resources on a failed platform can be a loss of invaluable time. Hamilton knows better than anyone. He lived in Mercedes with the W13 and the W14, where he insisted on evolving wrong concepts for too long. From the technical side, Maranello's engineers are trapped at a crossroads. They recognize that the pull rod suspension lacks stiffness, but modifying its architecture requires partially redesigning the chassis, a task that goes far beyond a simple parts update. In addition, any important change in the suspension directly impacts aerodynamics, which forces to review load maps, balance of weights, and soil geometry. That is, fixing the suspension problem is not only complex, but implies touching many other variables of the car. Hamilton's frustration is not free or impulsive. It comes from the technical finding that the solutions in progress could be insufficient or worse, too late. And that doubt is not just yours. In the paddock halls, it already mutters that what Ferrari needs is not an update, but a structural intervention. But in a season where McLaren, Mercedes, and even Red Bull are already looking at 2026 with simulations and wind tunnel models, the Ferrari maneuver margin is reduced by leaps and bounds. What is at stake is not only the performance of the car, but the credibility of a whole project. Because when the most successful pilot in history begins to publicly question the technical course of the team, the message that is transmitted is as strong as any result on the track. Hamilton is not only sending a signal to Ferrari. He is putting on the table the question that nobody dares to ask out loud. Is it worth following betting on the SF25? Austria represents much more than the next appointment of the Formula One calendar for Ferrari. The Red Bull Ring becomes an unavoidable technical judgment scenario. Unlike other circuits that can mask certain deficiencies with strategic successes or configuration adaptations, this layout does not forgive structural errors. Each curve, each braking, each change of direction demands a stable, precise, and predictable car. Just what the SF25 has not been able to offer so far this season. It is here that Maranello's supposed improvements must go from speech to empirical evidence. And if they do not, Austria will be remembered as the exact moment in which technical fiction was unmasked. The Red Bull Ring combines long straight with aggressive braking and high-speed curves, creating an ideal environment to prove the effectiveness of an aerodynamic platform. The layout configuration emphasizes traction in the output of slow curves and stability in high-speed inputs, two aspects where the SF25 has shown alarming weaknesses. The rear suspension in particular will be put under constant pressure. If the car cannot maintain a stable platform, the rear wheels will not receive sufficient load, which generates survival, excessive degradation, and loss of traction. In short, a perfect recipe for disaster. It is no accident that even Maranello's engineers recognize that Red Bull Ring is one of the worst possible circuits for a car with the SF25 defects. And it is not a coincidence that Hamilton has expressed his doubts just before reaching this layout. He knows what is coming. He knows that any technical promise will be tested under conditions that do not admit ambiguity. There is no space for excuses here. If the car is not up to it, it will not be anywhere. In this sense, Austria also becomes an emotional thermometer. The pilots, subject to a track that demands maximum confidence in the behavior of the car, will have to fight the machine, not next to it. And that is the most serious. Because in Formula One, the difference between attacking a curve and surviving it changes everything. If Hamilton is once again with a car that does not obey, that does not respond, that leaves it exposed, his faith in the Ferrari project could suffer irreparable damage. Even in the best stage, where the updates partially work, the challenge will be gigantic. Austria does not simply demand reliability. It requires absolute precision in the tuning, perfect interaction between suspension, aerodynamics, and tires. And for a team that has so far shown technical indecision, strategic errors, and an unstable platform, the margin of error is practically non-existent. What is at stake are not just points or positions. It is the narrative of the season. Because if in Austria Ferrari it is evidenced again, there will be no corporate story that resists the blow. It will be, symbolically, the turning point that will turn a season of hope into a year of survival. And for Hamilton, it will be time to decide whether his commitment to Red was an investment of the future or a wrong strategic choice. Austria is the mirror in which Ferrari must look without filters. And what this reflection returns will mark the rest of 2025. The coming tension is not only sports, it is narrative. Austria is not simply the next race, it is the culminating scene of an active revelation in this history of ambition, broken promises, and betrayed expectations. In this context, each sector of the circuit, each decision in boxes, each turn on the track is transformed into a test not only of the car, but of the Ferrari project as a whole. And when we talk about projects with a name like Hamilton in front, the margin of maneuver is practically null. The British has not reached Maranello to learn, but to win. Its history does not allow long adaptation cycles or years of transition. Therefore, every minute that passes without real results about the decisive moment. The questions that are open after this analysis are as disturbing as fascinating. Can Hamilton reverse this trend, or are we facing the beginning of the end of its riskiest bet? Will Austria be the turning point that returns Ferrari to the right path, or the clove that once again seals the coffin of his aspirations? Can the SF25 save its reputation in the most implacable layout for its defects, or will it be exposed as a technically condemned project since its genesis? Austria is, then, more than a simple grand prize. It is the scenario where it is decided whether this story will have redemption or fall, if the Hamilton legend can expand in red, or if this chapter will be remembered as the most frustrating of its illustrious career. Ferrari has only one opportunity to show that he is still able to build winning cars.